There's also a point where you're so scared that you're not going to be able to pay rent or get food or whatever it is. Like at whatever point you go, that fear sets in and almost paralyzes you.
Jenna, you ranked on Wall Street Journal's Real Trends top 1.5% America's Best Professionals list. Your very first sale was on Billionaire's Row. You actually attributed that to a little bit of luck, but what I don't see as luck is someone's ability to consistently work in a luxury market, and especially in a highly competitive market like New York City.
When you're an independent contractor and you move to a place like New York City and you start putting money into your business and your rent is 2x what I paid in Santa Monica, it was just one thing after another that sort of came to a point where I was like, oh my God, if I don't make a sale or close like 10 rentals in the next 2 months, they might kick me out here and I don't know where I'm gonna go. Up until that point, I was sort of in this like romantic comedy New York City moment where I'm like, oh, everything's so great here. And then you look at your bank account because rentals don't really pay the bills in New York, and that's all I was doing at the time. You make your own luck. It really is like the consistency, and that's why it's so important. I just really put in the effort because I knew I didn't have a choice, was the reason I made that sale at 157. And I think that's such an important thing that you don't really learn, at least I didn't learn in the first few years of my real estate career, is
Jenna, you ranked on Wall Street Journal's Real Trends top 1.5% America's Best Professionals list, and your very first sale was on Billionaire's Row, and you actually attributed that to a little bit of luck. But what I don't see as luck is someone's ability to consistently work in a luxury market, and especially in a highly competitive market like New York City. What do you attribute as being able to consistently work in such a highly competitive market like New York?
that's a great question, and I think you hit on a couple of points there, but your main point is consistency. And I think in a market like New York, you do have a range of luxury, right? Billionaire's Row is definitely the epitome of luxury in terms of
Hmm.
price per square foot, but there are certainly much higher numbers out there, and it's a constant competition and a constant struggle to level up. And I think that's really all it is just day in and day out, staying consistent and putting in the work, and you'll get there.
So when you talk about like day in, day out, like you've been in the business for 7 years, what consistently do you find like works for you on like a daily activities type of list, or something that you do on a monthly basis or quarterly basis? What are some things that work for you?
I love this question because I just did my marketing plan for the last quarter of the year. And just this year, I started breaking it down by quarter, by month, by week, and by day. And I think for my brain specifically, it really helped tackle the goal of whatever it may be. Let's say generating, 3 listings by the end of the year or putting 2 buyers in contract. It sort of gives you daily, weekly, monthly goals to hit that I personally think have helped me get to where I am, and which is, certainly nowhere near the top, but at least to a point of consistency with your numbers. And I can definitely share some more tactical things about that if that's interesting to people.
Like, what's on your list before the end of the year?
So my list is the goals are pretty general because our market, unlike other parts of the country, is at a pretty weird time. A lot of sellers and a lot of buyers are sort of sitting on the sidelines. So
Yep.
this is the time that we, desperately wanted so badly 2 years ago to work on our business, and now we have it. So the big pillars, value-driven content on social media, value-driven email marketing, and that's not necessarily just a bunch of broker blasts or newsletters. It's more targeted, what we call a Compass bulk email, where I have people tagged in my CRM as, yoga lovers or wine lovers. And I happened to be somewhere that was, a yoga retreat. So I found my yoga people and I said, hey, just went to this place in Palm Desert. It was incredible. When you have time to take for yourself, you should actually absolutely book this place. So it's things like that where you're staying present and you're staying in touch with people without being the annoying real estate agent who's like, hey, are you ready to sell? Hey, do you know anybody who you can refer to me? And that's been a big focus for all of my marketing planning this year.
Yeah, and it's funny because I imagine I'm in Tampa, so I got like to see what happened with everyone moving here. I can only imagine just New York City, like after everything, how sped up it was. It's almost like it was this constant go for like 1 to 2 years where it's just like moving forward. And that's been actually a conversation recently is like now you actually have a little bit of time to slow down, take in where you're at. And you mentioned your social media content, and I saw, like, for example, one of your posts, you said, if you were like me and sat on the sidelines during high school sports, you remember how it feels. It's boring and you feel like you're missing out. And that was kind of like your lead into the Compass search. um, First, most people would be scared to kind of say something personal like that. I would say because it is vulnerable. It is like you're allowing yourself to open up. So like, why do you do that? And then I'll first ask that question.
I love that you called out that caption because I was worried that in today's world, most people don't read anything beyond like the first three words. And I really wanted people to read that because I think first, self-deprecating humor is the best kind of humor. I think everybody can relate to that. And
Yep.
in the world of selling sunset and everyone trying to pretend like all we do is luxury and all we are the best of the best, I think it's nice to be able to be a little bit more relatable. And I think that's kind of the theme for my Instagram is yes, there's beautiful homes, and I think a lot of people enjoy seeing them on my Instagram, but they also appreciate seeing what it's like to actually be an agent. I'm sure you know it's not very glamorous all the time.
Yeah, because that's something I noticed about your Instagram feed. It's not just like condos, houses. It's not just like showing what's pretty. You show like the day in the life. You kind of show like a little personal side to you. Talk me through that from like a strategy perspective, because you come from a marketing background, and how do you think through that in the content you're posting?
I think that's a great question because I think a lot of people struggle with figuring out the right mix of personal and work. And we are in that profession where you do have to show both, I think, because we spend a lot of time with our clients. And if we are not the kind of people they want to spend time with, it's going to be a really hard, long transaction for everybody involved. So it's almost like a way for me to weed out the type of clients that I don't want to work with, that don't understand that kind of humor or authenticity or being, a little bit vulnerable.
Yep.
So it's partly selfish. And a big part of it is also trial and error, to be honest, because when I first started my Instagram probably almost 8 years ago, with a focus on real estate, I did just post houses and cool condos, and it was interesting enough, but I think I lost a lot of people were kind of like, okay, here's another condo. Like, what else you got?
Yep. So what you mentioned, like the email newsletter, you tag people with like yoga, and when you think through like either personal interests or like let's call them maybe like content pillars or buckets, like is there certain things that you kind of try to post about because it's a shared interest?
I do try to, and I think I don't do a great job, to be honest, because I'll find these iNotes in my phone where I write everything, literally my whole life is there, and I'll try to like categorize what I post about on Instagram just from my own head, and then I think I just forget about it, and it's more what feels valuable, appropriate, funny, interesting at the moment, and then trying to find a way to tie it back to real estate.
Yeah, I have like a I used to text message myself, um, and there's just like this long thread, and now it's just become like Slack channels. uh, is is there something that you do like when you're thinking through like what you're gonna post, or like, hey, I need to post this week, or maybe I should post about the market, or maybe I should do this? Like, can you walk me through that thought process?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's something that I found, friends, colleagues that struggle with, and they do ask me that question too. And I have gotten better at planning ahead. So I will try to hit, at least one personal post a week that's relatable beyond just real estate, whether it's, some restaurant I went to or somewhere I traveled or something about my personal life, being with friends or with my fiance or whatever it may be, just to show that I am also a human and not just a real estate agent. And hopefully find some kind of shared interest, or maybe a client of mine went to this hotel once and they text me like, "Hey, I can't believe you were there." So I'll try to do one personal, and then I'll try to do something that is relevant to today, whether it's a market update or something about, the interest rates. Or during COVID, it was a lot more relevant to post about what's going on at the moment. But a lot of it is trial and error and going back to previous posts and seeing what people really enjoyed and commented on and what didn't work that well. And I try not to do any of that again.
And the reason I ask, because I want to tie it back, because you had this listing in Kips Bay that I think you sold off of Instagram, and that may be right or wrong. You can correct me in a second. But this seller said some things that really caught my eye. Is you sold it when other agents couldn't, but then you also showed them things about the neighborhood, the restaurants, the bars, like your knowledge in that area was really deep compared to them, and they live there. So I guess first, was I correct in saying that?
I'm trying to remember the listing you're referencing because I had my first ever listing was in Kips Bay, and I did this video before video was really a thing. It was terrible. It was like horizontal. It only worked on YouTube. I couldn't even repost it to social media. But it was about the neighborhood, and it was about all these restaurants and coffee shops that are there. And the attempt was to try to find people online to come to the listing and put an offer in. But I don't think I sold it on Instagram. Oh, I think the one you're talking about might be Upper East Side. And that was during COVID, and we couldn't get people in the door. So we had to do everything virtually.
Okay. And that's the one I think that you had someone come in because you made a video about it?
It's possible. I'll have to look at the one that you're referencing because it's not ringing a bell, but I've definitely done some sales off Instagram. But of course, it's not completely,
Yeah.
the transaction didn't happen in my DMs, let's just say. But they did find me or they found the listing through Instagram. That's happened to me a couple of times.
So the reason I was asking, because you seem to have an expertise like in the markets that you work in, and then you like really sharing and showing that expertise. Um, was that by accident? Like, are you trying to build, a lot of people will call it like a niche or a market that they're targeting, like a farm area? Or is that just kind of something that happened? Like, was it by on purpose or by accident?
I would say a little bit of both. And I wish I was more thoughtful about geographically where I was getting listings and buyers, but I didn't have a choice, to be honest. I worked with anybody
Yeah.
and everybody when I first started out. And then organically, I think I started getting more listings in the neighborhoods where I had already sold something, and it sort of snowballed. And I just wanted to capitalize on the fact that I could bring a different marketing angle to a listing than perhaps somebody else wouldn't do, and a way to differentiate myself.
So that kind of brings up, you you used to live in Santa Monica, and you had a corporate job, and you actually said that you felt burnt out, so you decided to sell everything, book a one-way trip to New York City. Like, was that scary to make that move and do all of that?
I've gotten that question a lot, and I will say it was scary when the reality of no paycheck, no health insurance set in, but it happened after the fact. And I think that's the only reason I actually moved here is because I was sort of enamored with this idea of moving here and starting my own thing. And I just put blinders on. And I think that really helped me because I wasn't as, um, worried about all the things that could go wrong.
So why'd you pick New York City out of like all the places?
It was down to two. It was between Seattle and New York City. And both places I had always wanted to live in. My family moved from California to Portland, Oregon. So Seattle had a lot of factors going for it from a family and friend perspective because I have a bunch of friends in Seattle. And then New York was just because it's New York. And I thought, I was 29 at the time, or maybe 28 when I got the idea. I was like, all right, I'm almost 30. There's a very small chance that I'm going to do this after I turn 30 because then you just start feeling like everything is harder and you have more on the line. So that was the main reason why the favor pushed into the New York City bucket.
Yeah, because I kind of had that kind of similar, not action the same degree, but like there's a certain point you reach, you're like, it's almost like a now or never. And you kind of decide, well, after all these different decisions, you're like, okay, I might as well do it. But like, was it hard? Did your parents say anything about it, I guess, at first, or not really?
My parents know that I'm going to do what I decide to do, and that's kind of how I've been my whole life. And they are just,
Are you a rebel?
I would say I'm very independent. My mom moved to the US when I was 7, and I wasn't reunited with her
Hmm.
until I was 12. So I think having grown up without a mom for 5 years really helped me become independent and rely on myself. But with that said, my parents were really supportive, and while they weren't like sending me checks every month, they were like, "All right, if you feel like you're going to be homeless, please call us. We'll figure something out." And I almost did. I was very close. And then the Billionaire's row sale happened, and I was like, "Okay, thank God I can pay some of my rent now."
So take me back to that because you said you were almost homeless. You mentioned Billionaire's Row was luck, but I don't know if you think like this or not. Like I have this thought of like serendipity, where it's like nothing is really luck. It's there's a lot of things that tend to build up to that make it seem like luck. So what happened? Like you go from moving to New York City, starting in real estate, you had nowhere to live, and you almost end up homeless, but then you get that. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, I think, and just to be clear, I certainly don't want to equate, my situation to somebody who's actually, struggling without a roof over their head because I was just back on a couple months of rent. And for me, that was the scariest and closest thing to
Yeah.
being homeless as an adult. Because I'd always had, a corporate career and it's not something you think about even. But when you're an independent contractor and you move to a place like New York City, and you start putting money into your business and your rent is 2x what I paid in Santa Monica, which is already a high rent place. It was just one thing after another that sort of um, came to a point where I was like, oh my God, if I don't make a sale or close like 10 rentals in the next 2 months, I don't know if they might kick me out here and I don't know where I'm going to go. So that was a good wake up call because up until that point, I was sort of in this like, you know, romantic comedy New York City moment where I'm like, oh, everything's so great here. I love living in New York. I don't have to have a car to drive anywhere. And then you look at your bank account because rentals don't really pay the bills in New York. And that's all I was doing at the time. So I think that helped me become more focused. And I agree with you, serendipity, luck, whatever you want to call it. One of my favorite quotes by one of my favorite people, Rob Dyrdek, you make your own luck. Like he's the
Nice.
best. The Dyrdek machine, I'm all in. Like anything he puts out, I'm into it. But it really is like the consistency, and that's why it's so important, is what matters, right? If you're just, and I showed up to the office almost every day. I tried the cold calling thing. I just really put in the effort because I knew I didn't have a choice.
I think a lot of people, like, I shouldn't say a lot, but when you're in entrepreneurship, when you're in sales, it's not just like a straight line to the top. There's a lot of times where your back's against the corner, but I, I found that's where a lot of like, I forget what the quote is. It's kind of like in desperation, something like when your back's against the corner, you figure out a way. What are some of the things that you were doing in that time that kind of led up to what became who you are today?
I think that's a really great question because I think there's definitely a level of that that helps some personalities, including my own, to kind of, do better, do more, put in more effort. But there's also a point where you're so scared that you're not going to, be able to pay rent or, you know, get food or whatever it is. Like at whatever point you go, that fear sets in and almost paralyzes you. So I think for me, it was right before that point where I was like, okay, I have to really figure out a way to do this. And it was just trying everything. It was partnering with this person on this listing and, doing cold calls, which I hated, and then trying email marketing and then trying Zillow leads. And Zillow lead is actually, which I don't do anymore, but was the reason I made that sale at 157.
Okay. What were some of the things that worked early on for you?
Instagram. It
Instagram?
was 7 years ago, and it was way before Instagram became like a big marketing tool for real estate agents. But people started dabbling, and I used it for self promotion, really, which I know we're all using it today as well, but in a way that allowed people to know that I'm in real estate and not in marketing anymore. But from a value driven perspective, it was never like, hey, just out here, eating ramen again because I can't make a sale. Anybody out there? It was more like, hey, look at this townhouse. I just learned that you can Airbnb townhouses in New York City. And if anybody's an investor and looking for really, solid return, this is a good opportunity. And that's kind of how it snowballed. And I became more thought of as somebody who knows what they're talking about. And I kind of learned as I went, and that really helped me. That was huge.
Yeah, so back in like 2016, probably around the same time, I kind of went through like this weight loss journey. Long story short, used to be overweight as a kid. Um, and I kind of wanted to do that same thing where I was like, I wanted to be known in health, and I just shared everything that I was learning about health online. Is that kind of what you did?
That's exactly
You were
right.
just sharing everything?
Yeah, that's awesome, by the way. That's not easy to do. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think that's what people relate to the most, right? Because we all struggle with things, and we all, even if it's not, real estate, maybe somebody was struggling with another career they were starting, or in your case, somebody is like, I don't know where to look, but I know Andrew and he's posting about this. So if he's done this, like now I have a friend that I can reach out to, right? And I think that's kind of where it started
Hmm.
from. People were felt I was more relatable because I was sharing about everything, not just like the shiny, pretty condos that everybody's selling in New York.
Yeah. It, did so did any of that come from lessons in your old marketing job, or was that something you kind of picked up just kind of doing?
I think it was definitely something I picked up doing. I did learn a lot of lessons in my marketing career about email marketing and subject lines and just general business acumen that helped me when I was dealing with photography vendors or you know yeah, but I would say the two jobs are so different because you're pitching a
Yeah.
product that is, a multi-billion dollar company behind it, and then I'm one person who's, trying to pitch themselves essentially. So I would say some, but definitely had to learn on the go a lot.
Nice. So walk me through, like, you had Jenna in her whole marketing career. You understand campaigns, you started to learn marketing, and now where you are now, and if you look at your 2024 as like a yearly calendar of like, this is the Jenna McKay like brand or maybe team, whatever yours kind of like overarching, like what starts to fit underneath that campaign, and what are you looking to do in the next year?
That's a really good question. My sales manager would love it if I had all the answers for you right here. I think for me, it's probably going to be a lot of the same stuff. I kind of realized a couple years ago what worked for me and what felt like either um, waste of time or just I resisted it so much that I wasn't consistent with it. So it's a little bit of
Hmm.
taking what works, taking what I enjoy, and finding ways that those events can make me money. So specifically, getting more in front of people and being more a valuable resource, right? Less marketing, more reaching out just because I'm reaching out and curious to see how they're doing or how I can help or saying, hey, I just saw this apartment sold right next to you. I don't know if you saw, or I'll see something listed and I'll go, hey, I think we need to get you a nice neighbor because they're going to be living right under you. Do you know anybody? So just being more thoughtful with my outreach, trying to get in front of people more through events, my IG live talks that I started doing twice a month, newsletters, just anything that feels authentic and organic and hopeful, I'm doubling down on.
So starting to put all these pieces together that you said, you have the organic content on social, like some of the authenticity pieces, then you have your email newsletter, again, more value driven. Then you talked about events. Uh, you mentioned you want to have more personalized, kind of value driven outreach as well. Um, is there any, like, is that kind of what you're looking at, or is there anything I'm missing, or
Yeah, honestly,
anything that we should dive deeper?
I think that's a good place to dive deeper because I think a lot of agents have, um, their thing or they're, I know some agents are really amazing with Zillow leads and some agents are really amazing with, hosting open houses and converting people. I think I have enough years of trying different things to know what I'm better at and what I can consistently put out versus struggling to be consistent with. And I realized that is the most important thing is finding those things and just doing more of them. So for me, and events are, I would say, on the border of that because I get a lot of social anxiety from thinking about an event that I'm putting together. Like when you're, a little kid and you have a birthday party and you're like, oh, is anybody gonna come? Like every time. And so I hate them, but I love them because once people come, I'm so happy and it's so much fun and people enjoy them and it's a different way for us to see each other versus like, phone call or text. But that's definitely the philosophy that I've learned from some agents that I really admire. It's not about, how much money you're spending on video or Instagram ads or, you know, cool outfits to put together for like a reel. It's really more about how do you provide value and connect authentically. And I think the more I can be in front of people, the more opportunities I have to be that agent for them.
Nice. I kind of equate it like marketing to health and fitness, that none of us really like, at least I don't really love working out. I don't really absolutely love eating healthy. Like, I'm a foodie. Me and my wife, like, we went, I know you're getting married. I saw you're getting married in Italy. So we love there. But it's kind of like with marketing, doing your email newsletter, posting, like sometimes you don't really love it, but you know that you have to keep it up, keep consistent. And I think some of us can sometimes get stuck in that, like, well, do I need to post, like, or I just want to be creative, or like, have you ever struggled with that? And how do you work through that?
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. I think the parallel between being consistent with like nutrition and working out is kind of the same recipe for a lot of things in life, right? It's like, how do you get in shape? Well, you eat well and you work out consistently. But it's like there's no secret sauce. It's just doing those things day in and day out. But I think to your point, there are workouts that I just dread. And I know that if it's on my calendar, I will find every reason not to do it. And it's the same thing with real estate marketing, like cold calls or taking out a Zillow lead or even taking a phone call with Zillow lead, like literally sends shivers down my spine. And I find every reason not to do it. So I just stopped doing those things. And I think everybody has their niche that they know they're pretty good at. They don't do the best, but pretty good at that they also enjoy. And then just taking that and committing to yourself that you will actually do it, because then you really have no excuse not to.
Yeah. Are you introverted or extroverted?
I'm an extroverted introvert.
Okay, that's interesting because something that I'm finding like is a pattern. A lot of people who kind of like end up going towards like social media, video, emails, like myself. I'm a little more introverted, but like you put me in a group of friends, I can become more extroverted. Uh, do you find that benefit of like, oh, I don't have to cold call. I can just write a email newsletter instead, or like something like that?
Totally, totally. I was just thinking about this the other day. I think I'm a little older than you. I was in middle school, I think, when Yahoo Chat came out and like AOL groups and all these places where instead of, calling your friends, you could like chat with them, and then you could chat with strangers in these AOL chat rooms and Yahoo chat rooms, which are probably full of creeps, but it was like such a fun, cool thing. And I loved it. And I think the reason I loved it is because I am more comfortable like having some distance between me and people sometimes, not always, but like I know if I'm, at an event for 3 days, like our Compass retreats, I love them and it's so much fun. But when I come home, like I don't want to see anybody for like a week. I need to like decompress from people. And I think social media gives you that sort of buffer a little bit where you're interacting and you're being social, but you're not necessarily like overextending your introvert self, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. It's like sometimes you just want time to like decompress or just time for yourself.
Yeah, I think some people feed off other people's energy and they get energy from it. And I have some friends like that, but I think in general, when I'm around a lot of people for an extended period of time, I get drained. So, I think a lot of people are like that these days. I think we're all a little introvert, a little extrovert.
Yeah, I would agree. Is is that because there's a good merge that you do with like you do online stuff, but then you're also doing events. Like you're also it looks like you're pretty connected with Encompass or even outside. I saw some like the photos you're at like different events and stuff with like, and you've talked about how your network is your net worth. Has that played into the growth in your business at all?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's such an important thing that you don't really learn, at least I didn't learn in the first few years of my real estate career, is your broker colleagues are your best sources of referrals. And I'll be honest, when I first started Instagram and email marketing, I used to get so mad when people would copy, an idea that I would do or a subject line. And then, or people would sign up for my email address and they were brokers and I just wouldn't add them to my email list because I was like, I don't want them to copy my stuff. And that was such short-sighted thinking because over the years I've realized that having a big broker network is not only helpful to me, but also so helpful to my clients that call me and say, hey, I'm moving here, or do you know any other areas to invest in besides New York? And I can call, somebody I know very well that will take great care of them. So I definitely try to connect as much as possible with my broker colleagues because we learn from each other a lot. I love talking to people about and sharing marketing ideas now. I don't hold anything close to my chest. We all rip each other off all the time. It's like, That's kind of how it goes.
Yep.
So yeah, definitely an important one.
So with your email newsletter, because you've talked about a lot, and you have background in it, so I'm kind of curious. One, have you gotten business from your email newsletter? And could you give me an example? And then, and or at the same time, have you gotten feedback from clients about your email?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll say the percentage that of business that I get from it is not that significant when you look at the percentage that I get through referrals in my sphere. I think from last year it was about 3% versus 70% sphere. So it's a small drop in the bucket. But I think what it does do is that it sort of solidifies your brand to people, and it just reminds them in another form that you're out there, because not everyone's on Instagram and not everyone is going to come to my event. So I thought I realized diversifying is important.
And the reason I asked is because I'm sure do you have all your sphere and past clients on your email
I
list?
do.
So that's probably whether it's kind of like directly translated, it's secondarily translated, just staying in front of them.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's about the content too. And I'll give you an example that I was surprising to me. It was actually last year that my client said this to me. We were closing on their loft in Dumbo, and we were like walking out, and he was like, I don't know if I ever told you, but I contacted you because of your email newsletter. And I was like, you did? Like, yeah, I did. And it was during COVID, and I remember that newsletter I sent out. It was like maybe 2 weeks after lockdown, and we were all really scared and trying to figure out what's happening. And Compass came out with a really cool initiative. Actually, it was probably a couple months later, because it was during Black Lives Matter, and in New York City, it was, a huge uproar, and everybody was scared and didn't know, how to support, how to be there for their friends. And Compass came out with a really cool initiative where it was a 15% pledge, where they said, you have the option to pledge that 15% of your vendors at least will be Black. And I thought that was so cool, because people say, I want to support, but how are you really showing it? And I immediately thought that would be such a good message to send to my sphere, and maybe encourage other people to do something that's actionable. And it was that email that my client saw, and he was like, I really just love that you actually put it out there, instead of people saying like, oh, I support, I support.
That's awesome. That's amazing of you.
And I think it's such a cool thing to keep going with, right? And it doesn't have to be just that year.
Yep.
And it's something that has really resonated with me, because we have so many things happening and we all want to help, but what are you actually doing to help?
Yeah. And I think that's like a huge thing without diving too far down. It's like, how much are you saying versus how much are you doing?
Exactly. And that's when it mattered most, right? I think communication around events that are, scary, it really shows leadership. Speaking to the name of your podcast, I think that's really when people shine, is when things are kind of crumbling and scary, and you say like, that's okay, like we'll figure it out. This is how.
Yeah. And I want to dive into leadership in a second, but I do want to kind of follow that thread of email, because I feel like you have a lot of like expertise that you can share. Uh, what's your kind of mix between curation of content, things that you're sharing, whether it's like a link or a mini blurb, versus like you're creating this just for your email?
That's a great question, because I think a lot of people struggle with too long emails, and myself included. I used to write novels, and in today's world, I think the shorter you can make your email, the better. And almost every time I send mine, I think of ways like, how can I shorten it? How can I make it more, if you're interested in this, so here's a link, versus writing out paragraphs about each thing. So I've recently been doing sort of like a four category newsletter where I'll put 2 sentences about something relevant going on in my life or in the market, and then the rest of it will be a lifestyle edit about whether somewhere I went recently or something I saw that's relevant. One will be on the market always. Usually something from our open house report, that because people love seeing actual data of like who's visiting open houses in Manhattan versus Brooklyn, which neighborhoods. There will be one about um, what is it? Okay, lifestyle market.
Lifestyle
Oh,
market.
a restaurant or like ice cream shop of the month, and I'll ask people to send me ones that they've gone to. So it's definitely half lifestyle, half market, but the goal is to make it shorter and punchier every month.
Nice. Yeah, it it makes it a lot easier when you kind of have like, here's a, let's just call it a template that I'm going to work off of, because then you're just figuring out what am I going to plug into that template like this week or this month.
Exactly. Yeah, and we have pretty good templates with Compass, but I'm actually redesigning mine as we speak with my friend Aaron Cass. He's a really great marketer who's also a real estate agent, and he's creating a new template for me with my new branding, which I'll be releasing hopefully in the next month, and just
Nice.
more shorter bits because we live in a 3-second world, and most of my clients are busy people. They're not trying to read my giant long newsletters every month. So that's the goal every time.
So, what are some things that you've done with your newsletter that people have stolen from you because they were just such a good
Probably
idea?
nothing. It was all in my head. No, I think subject lines I see subject line thieves all the time. And actually more so with my old team lead Sherry. She had really good subject lines, and we would see a broker send out a broker blast like an hour after hers with the same subject line. Like, we're on this list too, right? But I think these days, I don't really see it as much with email. I see it more with Instagram, but that's also kind of the name of the game,
Okay.
right? We're all kind of doing the reels and the posts that resonate with people.
So, uh, there's this thing called kind of, I forget who said it. It's like, I think Gary Vee said it. It's like he wants to give love to people while they're alive, because it's a lot of the times like with artists and stuff, they get all of this praise and recognition after. So give a I want to give a little love to like your Instagram. Like what are what's like one or two things that like people have ripped off and duplicated just because it's been so well?
That's a good one. It used to happen a lot more before because I think I was sort of like, I don't want to say one of the only, but one of the few people that was consistently putting out Instagram content. So back in the day, I started doing like an open house roundup where I would create a public collection of Compass homes that were having open houses, and I would screenshot, the best photos from each listing, and I would create a carousel, and people love those. I mean, I still boggles my mind that those are one of my best performing posts because they're not reels. They're real estate content. I'm not in them. All the things that usually get a post to get more views and likes are not in these posts. But I remember I came up with that a while ago, and then I started seeing people doing the same thing. But what are you going to do? It was a good idea.
Yeah. You think it's because people maybe share it or save it?
They actually don't share or save that one as much, but they get really chatty about the homes. They're like everybody has an opinion about which one's their favorite, or yeah.
Um,
I still can't quite figure out why people like those so much.
okay. So you mentioned Rob Dyrdek earlier. Why do you like him?
Uh,
Because I follow him, so I'm
yeah,
curious.
I watched him on Fantasy Factory and Robin Big, and I just thought he was a hilarious character. But when I'm trying to remember where I first started following him more. I think probably later later seasons of Fantasy Factory where you started to see his business operation, and he wasn't and he wasn't really like the skater kid anymore. He was an actual business owner, and it was kind of impressive to me that he was able to build that. So I started following him, and then he put out the what is it, the Dyrdek Machine podcast on Spotify.
Yep.
And there I really got into him because he's like an insane time tracker. He tracks every like waking minute of his day. And I just thought that was so OCD and amazing. And it spoke to my OCD of tracking and time blocking. So I thought if this guy who's already so successful can find ways to be better, I could probably learn something from him. So that's how I really got into his like machine mindset and all of that.
Have you implemented any of it?
Um, I don't think I can ever be as intense as he is.
As
Yeah.
OCD as
You know,
him?
like wakes up at 4 and he gets like, 3 days of work done in the first 3 hours. But I do
Crazy.
love his thought process about how he batches his activities. I think that's super helpful, especially to real estate agents because we have to do so many different things every day and every week. And time blocking, which is sort of, a known thing that people have been doing for a long time, but really sitting down and eventually I will, but I'm waiting for his whatever amount that will help you track your time and then extract that data and figure out, how much time are you spending, for example, watching TV or walking to work or taking phone calls, and then figuring out how to become a little bit more efficient.
So I'm curious, were you always like that? Like, are you very detail oriented or are you not detail oriented?
With some things, I am really good at big picture planning. So like wedding planning, it's like my Super Bowl. I'm all over it. I love it. I have it down to like the hour, the second. I can see the steps that I need to take somewhere, and I can figure out how to efficiently plan my day. But as far as like details, like if I have to edit, a really long paper or something, which thank God I don't have to because I'm not a teacher, I would be terrible at it. I wouldn't be able to sit through it. I would just get so bored.
Probably enjoying planning your wedding. You have it, it's coming up, right?
Yeah, I have a year to go, but I've like planned most of it already because I'm just so pumped.
That's awesome.
It's a fun
Um,
exercise for my brain, and I get that it's not like that for everybody, but I think for me, putting down, you know, like it's almost like a project management skill, maybe. And I think that's useful in real estate too, because sometimes you have to take a lot of steps to get to the end result, right? Like if you have an apartment that needs to be renovated before they go to market, then you have to sort of create a plan for how to get to that end result. And I'm good at that part, but I'm not good at like the minutia of like reviewing, little tiny details.
and I was gonna tie it back. So actually, thank you for doing that. are are you a visionary or actually do you know EOS like visionary integrator type thing?
No, it's on my list. I want
Okay.
to figure that out. What is that called again? Is it like a test?
Yeah, so it's rocket fuel and traction. I forget which one exactly it comes from, but it's like the type of leadership. There's visionary leadership and there's integrator. Um, and a visionary is someone who is very big picture, can look years in advance. They have tons of ideas. They can sometimes almost like have too many ideas. It's kind of like a squirrel. Um, and then the integrator is someone who kind of likes to tweak. It's like 1% better, 1% better, and like they tend to be a little more detail oriented. I don't know if there's like one that you kind of lean towards or
I would say it's kind of like the extroverted introvert. I am a really good, how do we make this better and more efficient? And I have big ideas that get me excited, but I also really like working with somebody that is the visionary because I think then it's easier for me to help them bring their ideas to life. So I'm a little bit of both, I would say.
nice. So you might be a little like integrator leaning with like visionary,
Hmm.
which what I've heard is like visionary is a lot of good 0 to 1, or like, whereas the integrator is really good at like 1 to 100. So like integrators sometimes, because I think I lean a little more integrator. I'm not 100% sure. That 0 to 1 is sometimes a little slower, but like that 1 to 100, like they'll make something really good. Um, I was curious because do you have some sort of like process for like buyers or sellers, something that like you've built out?
Yeah, and I think to your point that you just made, I think that's exactly right. It's definitely the 1 to the 100 that I enjoy and I think I'm better at. Um, but as far as process goes, I definitely need an extra layer of detail-oriented support to help me
Yeah.
with the stuff that I miss because I'm like 90% there and then like the 10% I'll go, oh shoot, I didn't think about that, or like I didn't like correct the email. Like I it's definitely happened to me where I know, whereas I know people that are so detail oriented that they will review something like
Yep.
17 times before they send it out and it'll be perfect, and mine will be perfect like 9 out of 10 times. As far as processes go, that's been a big focus for the last couple of years with Compass, helping for sure. Like I will give them a lot of credit with helping me build my business. They've released tools that have been really, really helpful. But really, it's applicable to anybody outside of Compass too. It's figuring out your CRM and updating it daily or weekly. I'm more weekly these days, to make sure that it works for you and to make sure that you can, reach out to the people that you need to reach out to when you need to. And then also creating checklists for buyers, for sellers, for landlords, for tenants, and then not stopping there, but continually adding, tweaking, changing them as you go through each transaction. Because I think for me, especially 7 years in, I'm learning a lot of stuff with deals as we go. Obviously, the big picture things, but every deal is different. So anytime something comes up where it's not in the checklist or in the process, you're like, okay, we need to add that in so we don't do this next time.
So this kind of ties back to what said earlier. Like now is a big time to kind of work on the business, not just in the business. Is there any big projects that you're working on that you're like, this is kind of what I'm building?
How much time do you have? No. I'm so pumped about this. I am doing a huge marketing overhaul right now. It's been something I've wanted to do, I haven't had time to do, and I have the time now with the market being
Mm.
slower than expected. We should be like in full swing right now in New York City, and it's crickets. So I'm redoing a lot of things, with my Google business page, which I suggest to all real estate agents to take a class on, or even just talk to a friend that has a good one. Um, there's a lot of opportunity there that I've been missing by not having the right location, the right photos, the right links, all these things that could potentially lead to people finding me and connecting with me. So Google Business, I'm redoing my newsletter to make it shorter, punchier. We're doing a new logo, new lifestyle shoot, hopefully a video also. I have a really fun one that I love, but it's now probably 5 years old and it's starting to look a little grainy on our new iPhones. So it's time to update. So big marketing overhaul.
Were there any like big struggles throughout your career as an agent?
Yeah, I think definitely early on, and early on I would say would be like first 4 years of finding something that I can stay consistent with, and at some point in those 4 years realizing that I can't continue to try everything that everyone else is doing. I have to figure out what I'm good at. And the struggle part was having the confidence as a newer agent to tell yourself that you're good enough to keep doing it versus all the voices in your head that tell you you don't know, you're not good enough, look, you haven't made a sale in 6 months, so clearly something's wrong and you're not doing something right. that was the hardest thing for me because you're trying so many things and naturally some things won't work, and not to let those things get to you and stop you from trying more new things or doubling down on the things that did work was really hard for me. It took a lot of external validation to get me to the point where I started believing in myself, to be honest.
So, as long as you're okay with it, walk me through that like internal dialogue, because I feel like we all can struggle with that, but I think sometimes it's not always talked about. Uh, there's times like throughout the journey where you just have to like keep moving forward, and it's hard because everything on the outside is telling you to quit. How did you not quit?
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to talk about because I think a lot of people struggle with it even when they're not newer agents. I think in tougher markets like we're in now, these thoughts can creep in that say, oh, the reason you don't have five listings right now, like this guy next to you, and that's a big part of it as we compare ourselves, right? Is because, you took 2 weeks off the summer when you probably could have worked a little bit on the strip, or you could have done, a little bit more outreach before or after you came back. And all these things of could have, should have, would have, that are based on something that has nothing to do with you. And I think that's the part that's really hard to differentiate in our business because so much of our output is what we put in. And, there's only so many hours in the day and there's only so much, stamina that you have to keep putting in hours every day until you take a little break or you give yourself a day off and then you blame yourself for, you know, the reason that your business is not where you think it should be is because of that one day. And that's what I would tell myself all the time.
So, was it because you repeatedly, like, you kept showing up that helped push you through? Was it a mentor? Was it like your own self? Was it finding something to kind of, whether it's yoga on the side to kind of get your mind off that? Like, what kind of helped you?
Yeah, and I think it's probably a mix of a few things, but for me, finding mentors in the business that were real and authentic enough to say that they had similar struggles and that would honestly tell me what they thought about my business was really helpful because I think for me, I was newer to the industry and I didn't know if, you know, X at year three was where I should be versus and to be honest with you, it wasn't because they told me, oh yeah, you made X amount, so you're good. It was because they said it doesn't matter where you are now, your business, to your point earlier, is not going to go like this. It's going to go like this, and then like this, and then like this, and then like this. And you just have to focus on the things that work versus worrying about not doing enough. And that was a big changing point for me, um, where I realized that it's not a direct correlation to your input, right? It's not like me saying, okay, this one week I hit all of my time blocks perfectly. Now I'm going to have like seven listings. It's doing it day in and day out consistently and not letting negative thoughts prevent you from staying consistent.
So, not letting fear stop you from continuing to keep doing what you know works.
Yeah, exactly. And watching the negative self-talk because personally that's something that I struggle with and I didn't realize I struggled with it until I got into real estate and I felt in my own mind inferior to other people because this was my second career. I was nowhere near where I wanted to be income level, especially the first couple of years. And I realized that I can't continue to compare myself because that's what paralyzes you from actually taking action that gets you to the next level in your job.
So, I have a friend that that's like a big thing. He was going through this past year is negative self-talk. lack of motivation, and there's a lot of comparison at like with Instagram nowadays. What do you think like you needed? Like, did you have to read a ton of books? Did you have to like control what you're consuming? Like, what helps you when you're kind of in that place?
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of things, and it might be different for some people, but I think first awareness and realizing that you're doing it and realizing where those thoughts may be coming from. And for me, to your point, was, it was a lot of it was Instagram, and a lot of it was seeing, let's say your brokerage puts out a letter and they're like, here are the top sales, and it's always people that, I admire and aspire to be like, and differentiating between admiring and aspiring and feeling less than was a big distinction for me. And I think it comes from one, awareness, but also building up mental toughness. And that could be different for people. For me, it was meditation for sure, taking care of my health. And health means mental health, right? Therapy. I love therapy. I think everybody should be in therapy. Listening to inspiring things in the morning that really kind of put you into the right mindset, reading books that are inspiring or introspective and help you understand how your mind works. All of those things for me over the years helped me build thicker mental toughness, skin, if you will. But it's a daily habit. And I'm sure, as somebody who's, went through such a big weight loss journey, it's a lot of it is in your head, and a lot of it is a continual effort to stay, mentally strong.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I asked, like selfishly, because I've been at that low point in my life where like I felt like all things were going wrong, and what I attribute it now and kind of correlating it to you in what you just said, I should say, is that almost like immersion into like the opposite. Like when you not don't think about those things, but it's like you're just constantly like feeding yourself like good things. You're doing yoga. Like it's just almost like this immersion into like this bettering yourself. I guess if that's how I have to sum it up, maybe.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's knowing the things that make you feel stronger and happier and healthier, and doing those things versus the things that your monkey brain tells you to do, which could be destructive, right? Whether it's just becoming a couch potato and disconnecting from the world because you're so, upset at yourself or sad that you didn't get this listing or something like that. And instead of doing, and sometimes you need to do that, right? If, you want to wallow for a little bit, but then also know that your game plan after that is to do the things that will help you get back on track.
Yeah, I think that's good. And that's great, helpful advice. So I want to talk real quickly about kind of like the new segment, like draw your income. Like if we had a pie and you looked at your business as like 100%, where do all of those pieces of where you get business come from?
I love this segment. I think every real estate agent at the end of each year or at the beginning of a new year should put this out as a pie chart. And I'm going to start the movement, and I'm going to tag you in
Nice.
2024 when I get my numbers. But for 2022, yeah, I think it's so awesome because it's like everybody does things differently. And to our point earlier, it helps you understand that, your business and how you do your business doesn't have to be like how this person does their business, and you could both be successful.
Yep.
And for me, 2022 was 70% Sphere. So it's referrals from agents that I know around the country, referrals from past clients, or just people that I know. 27% was Instagram. And Instagram, meaning it wasn't direct clients that found me on Instagram. It was also most of the time either friends or brokers that said, hey, I know somebody who's looking for X. And then 3% was email marketing.
Okay, nice. And so just to quickly touch on, Because I feel like sometimes being in this business, you can hear everybody saying, well, just work your sphere, just work your sphere. And it's like this constant, like, for example, if I'm brand new and I'm just like, someone tells me work my sphere, like, I'm just thinking in my head, like, what does that even mean? Like, what do you think when, like, you say that, like, what do you do to work your sphere?
I think that's a really relevant question that everybody should be asking themselves now, especially because working your sphere when you're a new agent is a little bit different. I agree. You're not going and saying, hey, I have all these opportunities I want to talk to you about. It's really just connecting with people that you know in a genuine way. So right now, how I'm working my sphere is just asking people to go to coffee or have them join me for, whatever event I'm going to, and just asking them how they're doing and really making it about them and seeing how I can add value because it might not be this year or next year or even in the next 10 years, but people remember when you show up for them and when you're just there because you genuinely want to spend time with them. And I think that's the best way that you can work your sphere. And I think work your sphere, we should get out of our vocabulary because it makes us sound like sleazy, like car salespeople. Like I don't
Yeah,
want to work my sphere. I just want to hang out with people that I like.
that's a way better of putting it. You just want to hang out with friends and have great conversations, and eventually, if they want to do business, great.
Yeah, and if they don't, that's fine too. And I think there are some friends that you should never do business with, and that's totally okay. And not every friend is going to be a great referral partner for you, but at least you're enjoying yourself while you're working your sphere.
Yeah. So, as you said earlier, the name of the podcast is Breaking and Building Leaders. And I want to ask you, and first, I want to just commend you on everything that you've done to show your leadership as an agent and everything that you're continuing to show. Like, this is how you can build a business authentically, you can build relationships, you can, like, all the stuff that you're doing is, I think, a good example of what agents should do, especially on Instagram, your emails. What does leadership mean to you?
I think, and thank you. I appreciate that so much. I think hearing that said back to you is almost like you feel a little bit like an imposter. Like, I can't believe that I actually get to speak about what a successful business looks like because 5 years ago, I was listening to podcasts like yours, trying to get tips and tricks from other agents because I didn't have a business. But I think it's having really strong ethics and and keeping your word that your clients' goals or your goals are the most important things because then you're always doing your best to serve and to be of value to somebody. As cliche as that is, it's really at the root of what being a good leader is. It's putting other people before yourself and showing up authentically every day.
That's awesome. Being true to your word and then letting that work with clients too, because it's very easy in the sales business to want the next commission check, but that's not how you're going to necessarily get it. So,
Yeah, exactly. And people can see right through it. And I think then you feel like a dirty car salesperson who is like just trying to get a buck out of it. And that never felt right for me. And the thing that I think feels right, and you see it in a lot of really successful people, not just real estate agents, is they put others first and they stay true to their word.
that's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for joining and living, not just saying that, but you're living by it too. So that's awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a fun discussion, and I really appreciate how thoughtful your questions were. And I'm excited to listen to more episodes. I think
Thanks.
this is an awesome podcast.